Hi, everybody. We're talking about undue hardship, modified light duty, reduced work schedule, unpredictable leave, and how that works when you're dealing with workers' comp or not, and FMLA, and then FMLA is about to exhaust. And whether you're in a state and federal FMLA, it's going to be the same challenge. And what we recommend is on the 10th week, even with a predictable return to work date, you're reconfirming with the employee that they're actually coming back at their end of the FMLA leave because it's about to exhaust. And as many of you know, especially with workers' comp, it is incredibly, incredibly common for the person who is on leave to magically be able to come back after 3 months, after 12 weeks, when they're on workers' comp. It's 30 days, and then they return to work. So those aren't the ones that we're worried about, except for they feel like fraud. And if you have enough of that, that is exacting, and it is in the same job category, especially if you're a manufacturing environment or something that has a lot of people in one job, they're sharing data. So you might want to start looking at those med certs a little bit more carefully. But the key that I get run into the most often, and this is with really big organizations, everybody, is this transition from FMLA to ADA. Now, we've spent a lot of time talking about this and this whole concept of light duty. And if you've got a light duty corporate policy, you are implementing that light duty policy prior to ADA, because a light duty policy removes essential functions or the way you perform that essential function. Now, remember, light duty has no value under ADA. We need the exact certificate that tells us what your medical issue is, and not what your medical issue is, but how your disability impacts your ability. And if your disability is only going to impact your ability for a couple of weeks, that could easily be an ADA accommodation, even with a modified duty or removing weights that you're carrying or even changing your work schedule. And the reasoning is because it's a short, predictable deadline period of time. If you have an unpredictable request for a modified, lighter duty or reduced work schedule, and you don't know when they're going to be ending that, what you're really doing is allowing that employee to work less than their full-time requirements for their job. And I guess the question I'm asking is, if it's not an undue hardship to have them be gone as long as they want to be, and you don't know when they're coming back, and they're doing less than their regular 40-hour-a-week job, why isn't that an undue hardship? Why would we say unpredictable return to work date with removing functions of your job is reasonable? And if you can't knock it out because it may or may be reasonable, you're not sure, then you're going to this next level of assessment and doing an undue hardship analysis and finding out, is it okay to have an employee gone who's going to work less than 40 hours a week and you don't know when they're coming back? Ask your supervisor. My guess is they're going to say no. So then we're back to, do we have a predictable return to work date, even if it's an estimate? And then, as you know, my strategy under ADA is I will provide you a second leave opportunity under ADA once your first leave request has exhausted under ADA, if you are telling me that this is really a predictable return to work date. If you do it again, it is no longer predictable because it hasn't been, and it is now unreasonable because you are extending it and you're not really coming back to work and doing all of your work, all 40 hours of it. So the accommodation was not effective. So why would we provide you another accommodation for the same thing? Well, the doctor said it really would be. Well, the doctor said that twice already. So unless the doctor is really telling me you're coming back in 3 days, why am I extending it another 2 weeks? And these are really serious discussions and decisions you're making. But what I'm suggesting you do is that you make these serious decisions. Because if we extend people under ADA, first of all, we don't extend under ADA. We engage in a good faith interactive meeting and reconfirm it's not an undue hardship or unreasonable, whatever that request is. Every time they want to get another accommodation that includes leave, reduced work schedule, modified work schedule that is removing methodologies of performing essential functions so they are not performing all the functions. Somebody is stepping in, or they are actually on a light duty, which is defined by lifting, carrying, crouching, whatever they are defining it as. And we need it defined exactly what it is. So this undue hardship analysis piece seems to really be misunderstood for the most part, even with the largest organizations. And it seems to be misunderstood for the most part that you even get to do it. So when you're looking at maybe you have another person in your department, in your organization that handles workers' comp, and you're letting you know they need more time on workers' comp, so we're going to keep them on leave, that's fine. But is your policy now to put them on inactive status and post the job? Because if you're not putting them on inactive status and posting the job, you may have an inactive status that is really an inactive light duty status that you are giving them, a modified work duty status that you are giving them 2 to 3 months of time to try and work harden or prepare themselves in a better way to return to work. And this is a very, very well understood strategy for workers' comp because we want to return you to the workplace as quickly as possible, even if you're only doing part of your job, even if you're doing a modified light duty job, because then we don't have the experience factor of lost wages. But that strategy is not appropriate, everybody, under the American with Disabilities Act. It's just not. It's a workers' comp strategy. Once we are in ADA, we need to identify very seriously, is it an undue hardship? Is it impacting the other operations of the organization, the clients, the coworkers, in a way that is impacting their ability to come to work, impacting and getting their services, impacting the way we operate our business? There's a whole list of criteria for identifying undue hardship. And what we want to do is document that with objective data and then have the confidence to say, no, you don't get to take more leave. I'm sorry. Under some of these regulations, everybody, you can have 3 months of FMLA and another 3 months of estate leave and then ADA. So be very, very careful about these multiple regulations of yours that are happening in your state. And if we're in California, which is the one that is the most complex, you got FMLA that runs concurrent with workers' comp. Then and CFRA, by the way, will both run concurrent with workers' comp. And then when that's over and they have not returned to work, you are squarely looking at the ADA. And if it was a workers' comp leave, you're potentially looking at that 30 days, then 30 more days, and 30 more days, and you never want to accept that as a reasonable accommodation under the ADA, an unpredictable, unreliable return to work date. The other challenge when you go from workers' comp and FMLA to ADA are these modified or ongoing as needed intermittent leavers. And the bigger the organization, by the way, the more likely people are just being given this. And I never understood that. Let's make sure we nail this one down. If you are on an ongoing as needed, meaning unpredictable leave, how is that not an undue hardship? Well, if you're exempt and you don't have any standard hours that you need to be there to manage your staff or meetings or work with clients, or you can do that and manage that and then go home and work from home or work late in the office and get the rest of your work done on the days to compensate for the days that you couldn't work your regular anticipated a minimum 40-hour salary job because you're exempt, well, then you might be able to do that because you can work as many hours as you want to when you're salaried, and you can work those extra hours if you can get into the office, or we can let you telecommute. So you can then do that modified as needed leave and compensate for that work you didn't do in that same week. If you're not compensating in that same week, they're getting a salary for a full-time job and they're working a part-time job. Now, keep in mind, I tend to go into detail with these things. So keep in mind that if you have an employee who is exempt and you determine they work 55 hours on average a week, you can turn them into an hourly employee, or you can make them keep track of all the hours that they are taking FMLA leave and deduct it from their salary. And call your Department of Labor if you're in a state that is very, very persnickety about this, so you're very comfortable in the way that you are implementing that. So there's a couple of different strategies that would allow you to do that, but only if they're going to make up that time that week. If you're going to do it by reducing their salary, how long will you allow them to not work their full hourly or their full weekly job under ADA? How long can they not perform all the functions of their job, meaning all the hours they're expected to work at a meets expectations level? How long will you be okay with that not happening? And this is the challenge, is that if we go from workers' comp FMLA to a light duty or a inactive, well, the inactive status means you're posting a job, so we don't want to call it that. You want to have it worded in a way that makes it very clear, if you're going to use inactive to not post a job, how long you would allow that to occur. And then it will be inactive with a job posted. You could write it that way also, but it's important that you implement it consistently. And once we are done with that minimum time frame that we're going to let you do light duty or modified duty, then we're back in ADA again. And if you're in inactive status because of workers' comp, when you exhaust the light duty program and or they're on inactive status and they have a new medical certificate that is less restrictive, both of those require a good faith interactive meeting. And this is when you really want to be very clear. If something is an undue hardship or it's unreasonable, it's your job, everybody. Your CFO, your CEO, your safety manager, your department manager, none of them are responsible for this. This is really the leave and ADA accommodation manager's job, is to be that voice of reason and say, wait a minute, they're supposed to perform all the essential functions of the job at a meets expectations level to be a qualified individual with a disability and even be eligible for an accommodation under ADA. And keep in mind, if you manage to give them, because you can, and it's not an undue hardship, leave under the ADA, you can cut off their medical benefits now because they are no longer protected under FMLA. So please be sure that you are absolutely cutting off medical benefits once you can, and you're letting the employees know that you will be and you can and when you can in a really nice way, because that allows them to plan ahead for what they need. So the overall strategy of transitioning from FMLA to ADA is the sole responsibility of HR to engage in that undue hardship analysis and that reasonableness analysis to make sure whatever that employee is now asking you to do under ADA will allow them to perform all the essential functions of the job at a meets expectations level, or for a very short, predictable period of time, be on leave because they've already been gone for 3 months, everybody. And at that point, we are cutting off their healthcare benefit if they're gone for more than a month, everyone, or we are not if it's less than a month, and we are not posting their job because we're providing the leave temporarily as a conditional accommodation pending that confirmed return to work date. And as soon as we don't have a confirmed return to work date, it's no longer a valid accommodation. So I know that's a lot of details, but it really is the same procedure every time. Conditionally designate pending the exhaustion of FMLA. If they haven't gotten you the ADA certificate, we send a notification on the 10th week of FMLA with the ADA certificate for the employee's own medical condition if we have any inclination that they are going to exceed 12 weeks. And we're explaining to them, do you remember? And it says in the letter, your medical benefits will be cut off in 2 weeks or the first day of the month following the month in which the unpaid leave ends, or begins, or is in the middle of, or ends from FMLA to ADA. I can't remember exactly what the letter says, but it says all of that. And then that's a catalyst sometimes to get them back, especially with workers' comp. But it's also letting them know that they now have to fill out this 4-page medical certificate that they discuss with their doctor, and they review their job description with them, and they fill it out and they tell us line by line, environmentally, schedule wise, leave wise, task wise, how does your disability impact your ability to perform this function the way it's normally performed? And if you can't, now we've got something to talk about in terms of accommodation. But it is never light duty and it's never telecommuting, because those aren't real restrictions. Those are accommodation requests without the underlying objective data to support the need for the restriction or what the actual restriction request is, because I can't do this. I can't wear this. I can't get there. Then we have a question to answer about how they're going to do this, wear this, or get there. And that is the accommodation. So does anybody have any questions? Because I'll go ahead and answer them, and otherwise we'll sign off on this podcast. Does anybody have any questions about that? Did I confuse any of you? So that's a good sign.